All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I am so pleased to welcome you back to our SAS Transdisciplinary Seminar, Fall 2021. Thrilled to have you joining us this beautiful November morning, and very pleased to welcome our three guest speakers today who are going to be talking to us about innovative partnerships for sustainability science, which is a very exciting topic for us because it is really one of the core defining features of how we try to tackle sustainability challenges, which cut across fields and disciplines and scales, and so therefore necessitate a collaborative approach and a partnership kind of approach. So very thrilled to welcome our three guest speakers. I would like to introduce you to them. Some of you know them, but you may not know all the details. So let me begin by introducing Dr. Ryan Plummer, who is obviously a professor and a director of the Environmental Sustainability Research Center here at Brock University. He's also presently an adjunct professor in the Sustainability Research Center at the University of Sunshine Coast in Australia, and an adjunct faculty in the Department of Environment and Resource Studies at the University of Waterloo here in Canada. He's held the position of Senior Research Fellow at the Stockholm Resilience Center in Sweden and Science Director at the Canadian Rivers Institute here in Canada. His multifaceted research program of research broadly concerns stewardship, environmental governance, and social ecological resilience. He's the author of over 100 peer-reviewed articles and the editor and co-editor and author of 4 books, including a book published during the pandemic called Water Resilience, Management and Governance in Times of Change. So thank you so much, Ryan, for joining us this morning, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. Second, we've got Amanda Smits. Amanda, who many of you may know, but welcome to everyone else. Amanda holds a Master's of Education from Brock University. She's the Center Administrator for the Environmental Sustainability Research Center, where much of her work focuses on this project management of our multiple innovative community partnerships the center has formed over the past 4 years. She completed a Master's of Education in the Administration and Leadership stream at Brock, where her research focused mainly on post-secondary sustainability policies in practice. And in 2019, Amanda completed the Certificate in Knowledge Mobilization through the University of Guelph. Amanda was recently awarded the Faculty of Social Science Staff Student Experience Award, and in 2019 was also the recipient of FOSS's Staff Award for Community Engagement. Amanda, thank you so much for joining. We're thrilled to have you here. And last but not least, we are joined by Sam Witkowski, who is a recent graduate of the Masters of Sustainability program. Her thesis research focused on monitoring and evaluation strategies in environmental planning and management. Within this, she investigated stakeholder perceptions of key performance indicators for M&E in 2 different environmental management contexts. Her research was conducted in collaboration with the Niagara Parks Commission as part of the Excellence in Environmental Stewardship Initiative, and she currently holds a position as a research assistant at Brock University and supports the activities of several innovative partnerships and projects within the Environmental Sustainability Research Center. So it's a very powerhouse team. We're so thrilled to have you join us. I am going to share my screen and hand it over. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Jess, for that incredibly warm and gracious introduction for the 3 of us. We're just thrilled to be here this morning and want to thank you for the invitation to share a little bit about this topic with yourself and certainly with the students in the audience. So the title of our presentation this morning is Community Partnerships for Sustainability at Brock. And I want to just start out our talk by really kind of framing this, that the presentation that we're going to give really is at the nexus of part context for our Environmental Sustainability Research Center, part application for what we do on a daily basis, and also part theory and science. And so trying to weave those 3 strands together. And I think that's really indicative, as Jessica has said in her introduction, of much of what we do as sustainability scientists. So if I can get you to go to the next slide, Jess, that would be great. In trying to speak to that nexus, there's three main messages that we want each of you to take away from today. First and foremost, we want everyone to understand a little bit more about what the ESRC is, and really fundamentally, what is this thing about sustainability science? And I know in your various classes, you've had a chance to dig into that. Obviously, this is a short presentation, so we're not going to be able to get into as depth as you do in those courses, but really want to bring home how we try to enact sustainability science as a center and make those connections to what I know you're learning in your other classes. The second main thing we wanted to do today is provide you with an overview of how we as a center, as faculty and staff and students enact these innovative partnerships. So we're going to provide you with an overview of how that actually occurs. And then last but not least, the third thing we want you to take away from today is a little bit about how this kind of emerged as a really exciting new line of inquiry. And I think that's indicative of how sometimes excellent and exciting new avenues come about. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And so if I can get you to go to the next slide. So as a starting point, I want to say a little bit about context. And it's often interesting to me. I spend a lot of my time, probably too much time, in administration, and part of that is adhering to the different policies that we have at Brock. And many of you may or may not be familiar with kind of the policy infrastructure that goes on behind the scenes. And so this of course is a picture of our beloved Teal House, but it also shows our strategic plan. And so every unit at Brock has to have a strategic plan. That strategic plan provides guidance as to where we're going and our directions, what our mandate is, and how we try to enact that. And we typically have these strategic plans, which we adopt for 5 years. And so this is our second official strategic plan since we've been in existence. And it sets out what we're trying to achieve in terms of our research, in terms of our education, and also in terms of our service. And so interestingly, I'll just give you one example. Our strategic plan in terms of education started out with, the master's program. That was our first educational program that we developed. And then in our strategic plan, we said, okay, over time, we want to grow that. We want to have an undergrad. We want to have a micro-credential, eventually a PhD. And of course, the PhD just came into fruition. So all of this is providing some guidance to us. And if we can go to the next slide, that's grounded, and I mentioned our mandate, and the ESRC, we're all part of it. This is the mandate that we as a group came up with. We had a facilitated session to make the strategic plan where we had a facilitator come in, take us through a series of exercises, and this was the vision that we had consensus about what the ESRC is. And I also want to just add here that, a strategic plan and a mandate or a mission isn't something that's static. It changes. This is a second iteration. It reflects who we are or were at that time. And then we'll revisit this again in 2023, and it might change. And part of our presentation today is really how some of those changes can be really good and exciting. And of course, as resilience thinkers, we know you have to expect the unexpected, and we have to anticipate change will happen, and change can be a really good thing. So one of those exciting changes, if I can get you to go to the next slide, is a big change that we underwent here at Brock. And just like I spoke that the center has a strategic plan, Brock University also has a strategic plan. And it came out in 2018 with the title Niagara Roots Global Reach. And for myself, one of the changes that occurred at Brock relatively recently that was just inspiring for me personally and professionally was when President Gervin Fearon, our past president, joined Brock. And Dr. Fearon had a vision for what Brock could be and really put a strong priority on how we engage with our communities right here in Niagara and also across Canada and globally. And I had the extreme good fortune of meeting with Gerben on several occasions. I'm not really sure how we started, but in those conversations, he really saw, I think, the excellent potential that the ESRC had, what we as faculty, staff, and students were doing, and he was a huge supporter of that. And I'll never forget one of the meetings I had with Gerben. You know, it started out, I was sharing a bit about our innovative partnerships and our vision as a center, and we were brainstorming, and he set out some ideas, and he said, you know, I want you to think about these things, and he was willing to support those. And then the next meeting, he came back and he said, you know, Ryan, I don't want to put any constraints on you and your team and what you're doing. I think it's excellent, so I'm just going to give you this support, and I want you to run with it. And that was just something that I've never experienced with a senior administrator ever. And I came back from the tower to Teal House, and I remember Amanda was sitting at her desk working, and I opened the door and I sat down, and I couldn't talk. And anyone who knows me, that's rare. I usually, no problem, chatting too much. So I just sat there for a minute, and I said to Amanda, you're not going to believe this, but Gerben literally wants to support our work and just let us do what we want. So it was just a really inspiring moment. So again, really important to frame the context here. If we can go to the next slide, Jess, that would be great. So I promised that I tie this into sustainability science. And at the start of the presentation, I want to anchor it in the practice and science of sustainability. And then at the end of the presentation, I'm going to come back and make some of those connections specifically through innovative partnerships. And so this is one of those iconic visuals that we have, and really, to me, is an excellent signpost. And Lang and colleagues put this forward, you know, a number of years ago now, but I still find it really helpful to think through, what do we do as sustainability scientists? And if we think about that transdisciplinary research process, which is the center column here, you know, we start with framing what is the problem and working in a team in a transdisciplinary way to make sense of that. And so it's not us sitting in the ivory tower. I mean, I despise that framing that's somehow what we do, as making sense of them. What are they about? How do we understand them? And when we start thinking about what and how we understand them, we come to a shared understanding of those challenges, and then we start to work through that process. And I see that I've lost Jess and our slides, but I'll just keep going, and hopefully they can reappear some point. So as we work through those different phases then of that process, and if we had Lang's diagram up, we could then see that we come together as a team and we engage in a transdisciplinary way to work together to actually navigate those different spaces and challenges. And as we do that, and both the right and left-hand sides of that diagram illustrate, we actually are able to then see that we move forward concurrently with both societal practice as well as scientific needs to ultimately arrive in phase C, where we, you know, implement that co-created knowledge and practice.
I can jump
So
in
I'm
here,
going to just, oh no,
I'm wondering if Jess wanted to weigh in and tell us if she could share her screen. If not, we can make it work. We're just experiencing a technical glitch.
Apologies.
100%.
It looks like it's sharing on my end. It is not. Let me try one more time and you let me know.
No.
So maybe while Jess is troubleshooting that, I can just keep going. So I'll do this all from memory, and if I make no sense, somebody just flag it. But so that process that I just articulated, and I think that visual that Lang and colleagues put forward, really to me is a signpost of how we engage in this process of sustainability science. And so what does that mean? What does that look like? Well, number one, it's coming together and taking a transdisciplinary view or approach. It's working together in collaboration with those inside of the academy and outside the academy. It's co-creating using multiple different types of knowledges. And it's really engaging and trying to solve, address. I prefer the word navigate because I'm not sure we ever can actually solve some of these complex challenges. But it's really coming together for me in an integrated type of way to navigate some of these really difficult circumstances that we find. And Jessica, in her warm introduction, mentioned how these challenges interrelate. So they're not just challenges about, for example, biodiversity or about the oceans or about the health. They're usually intertwined social and ecological challenges. And so what we've done as a center is we've launched, and I want to give Amanda full credit for pushing me. And sometimes I won't say I was set in my ways, but prior to Amanda's arrival in the center, there was a focus on what I would call more conventional type of research. And a number of us had done and always have done community-based research, but that was really different or new for some of us. And so at that time when Amanda joined us, she brought this real passion for engaging with all different types of individuals, and that resonated kind of at the same time that sustainability science was really taking off. And so we formed what we affectionately call our Innovative Partnership Branch. And this was a way that we actually enact sustainability science. And that's with the support of our past president, really growing and taking on a life of its own. And so I'm going to now turn it over to Amanda to speak with us a little bit about how we enact sustainability science at the center and provide that application and context piece. Take it away, Amanda.
Thank you, Ryan. That was wonderful. I'm going to try to present without slides, which Ryan seems much more comfortable doing than I feel right now, but I'm going to do it. And we're going to hopefully at some point, Erin is going to pop on. Oh, she's magically appearing now. And she is going to try and share her screen. I'm sorry about all the technical difficulties. And so I just want to talk to you about and give you an overview of all of our different community partnerships. So as of right now, we have 8. A few really important things to keep in mind around the partnerships that you'll see a list of in just a second. Erin, you're amazing. Thank you so much. A few things to keep in mind is that this list of partnerships that we have, so we're on slide 8, Erin, if that's helpful, they all have formalized memorandum of understandings, or as we call them, MOUs, associated with them. And so these MOUs typically describe the responsibility of each partner, so both us at Brock and the outside organization that we're working with, and what those responsibilities are for each of the teams, the goals of the partnerships, and any associated funding available to the partnership itself. So the funding or resource piece is a really important point because these types of resources really allow us to do the work that we've done that I'm going to talk to you a bit about coming up. So the resources are required, and I say this all the time, we couldn't do what we do without them. And so yeah, I'm going to tell you a bit about NEC on the next slide. We'll go through each of the partnerships. We're going to start with the Brock Lincoln Living Lab. So Erin, if you could go to the next slide for me, thank you so much. So the Brock Lincoln Living Lab is a 5-year partnership agreement with the town of Lincoln. It's actually the first partnership agreement that we signed in the fall of 2017. And it's really been used as a cornerstone of the community engagement focus that Brock University has taken on. Lincoln is one of the fastest growing municipalities in Niagara with one of the most diverse economies, which includes agriculture, healthcare, and small advanced manufacturing. The Living Lab concept we based this partnership off of came from Steen and Van Buren, where living labs are seen as a real life context where users, public actors, private actors, and knowledge institutes work together to really create and navigate unprecedented challenges and opportunities. So this partnership was our first, and while it's been challenging, it's also been truly rewarding. It's really, out of it have come several other partnerships, and some of like our first ideas around what community partnerships could be really came out of the Brock Lincoln Living Lab. And I should just note quickly, each of these partnerships you'll see in the top left corner are led by specific faculty members, or in the next case by myself. And so that's a really important point, and one that's also denoted in all of the MOUs that we sign, is they do have a lead on both our side and the partners side, to make sure that the work is done and facilitated throughout the life of the partnership. Erin, if you could just go to the next slide. We tried to integrate some photos into this presentation to really show you some concrete examples of our partnerships kind of in action. And so on the left-hand side there, you'll see two of our Master of Sustainability graduates now. They were co-op students when the Living Lab was launched. And so Ben and Zach are in this photo, and you can see the sign that's been erected at the Town of Lincoln Town Council building in Lincoln. They're very proud of the work that we've done. And these two co-op students were really integral in the launch of the partnership itself. In the top right corner, you can see a senior management team kind of work session that we held, where we really got the input from the senior management team on the action plan that we would put in place at a later date for the partnership itself. So having people from the partnership come in and really play a role in the planning piece is important in all of our partnerships. So we really do normally take the first 1 to 2 years to kind of plan out with all of the employees and stakeholders playing a role at the organization to really decide what do we want to do with this partnership. And then the bottom right-hand corner is actually a field trip that we took for SAS 5PO1 a few years back to the Town of Lincoln Town Hall. So we really hope to be able to host another field trip either this coming winter or next fall, where all of you can also join us. Erin, can you go to the next slide, please? Our next agreement that I wanted to talk to you a bit about, and you might have seen already online, is the Brock University Charter Agreement. This is a 5-year partnership to really bridge the operating and academic constituents concerned with sustainability at Brock. So it leverages, we focus on leveraging the resources of both facilities management and our center to further knowledge around sustainability across campus. So through the years, environmental sustainability initiatives have been instituted across Canada, or across Brock, sorry, in terms of like energy upgrades and water savings and waste management initiatives, as well as new infrastructure and retrofit projects. But many of these initiatives tended to fall under facilities management at Brock, and the department itself lacked the resources required, so human and financial, to actually translate the outcome of these initiatives. So, you know, the impact, the savings, the awareness pieces to the Brock community. And so we recognized that there was a gap here, and this partnership really aims to address the knowledge to action gap by leveraging the resources of both units again, and focusing on communicating these great pieces to the broader Brock community. So Erin, if you could just jump to the next slide, I'll just give everybody kind of a few neat takeaways of what this partnership has done to date. So the top left-hand corner photo is our Women in Sustainability panel discussion that we hosted a few years back for International Women's Day. The top right corner is an example of how we're trying to engage students in sustainability across campus. So we did a social media campaign around sustainability pledging. Most recently, we hosted a virtual Welcome Back Sustainability Challenge, where we asked Brock students to track their sustainable behaviors in order to have a chance to win several really neat prizes. And then lastly, the bottom right-hand corner is actually Dr. Fearon speaking to those in attendance at a Sustainable Development Goals training day that we co-hosted with Brock's Model UN Club a few years back. So there was students there that day, faculty, community members, all taking part in the training day together. It was really, really a neat event. So that's just kind of a high level overview of a few things that we've done through that partnership. If we could jump to the next slide, Erin. The next partnership is the Living Planet at Campus, our partnership with World Wildlife Fund Canada. That's WWF for short form. This is actually linked to the partnership I just described above. It's a 2-year partnership agreement with WWF Canada, where Brock University becomes a Living Planet at Campus partner. As a Living Planet at Campus partner, Brock will basically promises to help support student learning outcomes and professional development by providing opportunities for students to actually volunteer to earn hours that they can contribute towards their Living Planet Leadership Certificate that WWF offers. So it's a nationally recognized certificate, and we play a role in trying to provide students with opportunities to actually contribute to their 40 hours of volunteering that's required for the certificate itself. And so that's linked directly to our Sustainability at Brock partnership with facilities management. The next two partnerships that I'm going to talk about are both with Niagara Parks Commission. Niagara Parks basically oversees the land all along the Niagara River from Niagara-on-the-Lake to the town of Fort Erie, or the city of Fort Erie, sorry. So the first one is the Excellence in Environmental Stewardship Initiative. This is another 5-year partnership agreement. I'm sure you're seeing a trend now that we tend to sign 5-year agreements. We recognize that time frame allows us to do a lot of work and actually show progress, which is amazing. So this partnership focuses on key issues within Niagara Parks, basically to provide options for addressing needs and opportunities related to environmental stewardship. So Dr. Ryan Plummer is the person who leads this partnership. And one of the biggest pieces to come out of this partnership in the last few years has been a full environmental stewardship plan for the parks, which has been really rewarding to see kind of come to fruition. Erin, if you could go to the next slide, I'm just going to give a few examples of different things that have come out of this partnership. So top left-hand corner, this is really interesting. This was actually a Social Science Research and Humanities Council Insight Development Grant announcement. And obviously this was taken pre-COVID, which is why everyone's next to each other with no masks. Dr. Julia Baird was awarded over $65,000 to work with NPC, who were partners listed in the grant application. So we're seeing more and more nowadays that grant calls are coming with a requirement to have an outside partner take part in the work, which is amazing. So these partnerships have not only benefited the partner, but also benefited us in many ways, where we can reach out to the partner and say, hey, I have this great research opportunity. Could we work together on this as well? So that's really, really been great. The top right-hand corner is Angela Mallet, who is a Master of Sustainability grad. She was doing her thesis research at the Niagara Glen, which is a property of the Niagara Parks. The bottom right is actually us hosting a similar senior management team or NPC leadership team workshop where they had input on the environmental stewardship plan. And then the bottom left-hand corner is the environmental speaker series, which is in its 2nd year now. It's a co-hosted series between us and the Niagara Parks Commission focused on environmental stewardship. Our next event's actually coming up on November 25th. So we'd love to see some of you if you can join us for that. If we can skip to the next slide, Erin. So I said we have 2 partnerships with Niagara Parks Commission. The second is called the Trails Asset and Tourism Initiative. This is actually hosted or led by, I should say, one of our faculty affiliates, Dr. Garrett Hudson from Recreation and Leisure Studies here at Brock. So we signed this agreement in March 2020. I'll never forget, it was kind of a few days before the world came to a screeching halt. This agreement is actually a tri-party agreement. It also includes the Ontario Trails Commission. So it's a really, we've done some interesting work around the trails that Niagara Parks has and how to best manage the trails. You can imagine that a lot of the trails have seen increased use since COVID. And so in a lot of these partnerships, we've had to pivot a bit along the way. which has been interesting and challenging, but some really great things have come out of it. And so we will be sure, we should have said this at the beginning, but we will share this presentation with you because there's a lot of interesting links along the way that you can kind of learn more if you want to. I'm skimming over these, but we've done so much in each one of them. And we're just trying to give you a high level kind of overview and try to get you to understand this full scale of how many partnerships we're talking about when we say innovative partnerships. So Erin, if you could go to the next slide. Oh yeah, go ahead, Jess.
I might just pop in for 1 second to say, I just shared the slides with the students just in case there's any tech issues. So if they need to, they can follow along too. And then all the links you're talking about are available to them. So
and if anyone from the outside is also joining in, because we do circulate these widely, if you would like a copy of this presentation, we'd be more than happy to share it. If you want to email esrc@brocku.ca, our coordinator, Erin Daly, will share the slides with you because she also now has a copy and because she's sharing her lovely screen right now and has saved all of us. So thank you both. Okay, so getting back to it, we only have a few more to go over. I feel like I'm running through these, but we really just wanted to give you a high level overview. The next one is the Prudence Project. So when I said the Brock Lincoln Living Lab has kind of spawned off into several partnerships, the Prudence Project is a second partnership that we have. It's also a tri-party partnership. So it's between the town of Lincoln, ourselves, and Vineland Research and Innovation Center. And so we're really focused in this partnership on sustainable community development, and it's focused specifically on the Prudence development, which is a large site on the shores of Lake Ontario, where really they're trying to create an intentional community where they're focused on, you know, low impact development and green infrastructure. And so the three partners are working together alongside the developer in the area to really make sure that this vision comes to fruition with basically research-based knowledge that we're sharing with both the developer and the town of Lincoln. The next partnership, Erin, if you could just go to the next slide, is our partnership for Freshwater Resilience. This is actually our original partnership with World Wildlife Fund Canada. After we signed this agreement, they had let us know that we could also become a Living Planet at Campus Leader, which I talked about just a little while ago. So this is again a 5-year partnership agreement, and the Prudence Project was also a 5-year partnership agreement, which it's stated on the slide there. Over the past few years, this partnership has been specifically focused on the St. John River Basin out in New Brunswick. One of our partners from WWF Canada works out there, and his work is focused in that area. And so there's been some really interesting outcomes here as well, which you can see in the 2020 year in review. But it's really focused on freshwater, you know, how partners work together, and it's led by Dr. Julia Baird. If we could go to the next slide, Erin. So we have 2 more left to share with you today. The most recent signing, partnership signing, was with the Government of the Northwest Territories. So this is our newest partnership. Really, we wanted to focus on co-creating and implementing 2 accessible courses in leadership and environmental sustainability for our non-credit certificate. And so the work is being done to co-create courses for the GNWT, or the Government of the Northwest Territories, specifically their Environment and Natural Resources Department, to create courses for them that are, you know, based in Northern principles and understandings, and then developing a professional development course in social sciences that focuses on stakeholder engagement. So they recognize these as kind of being holes that we could provide some kind of expert knowledge in. And so this one is really focused on the co-creation of knowledge. To date, we've developed a workplace needs assessment for GNWT, and a questionnaire has gone out to all employees in the Department of ENR, and we're now analyzing those results in order to create those co-create those tailored courses for their employees. So this is a really exciting one. It's just at the beginning kind of launch stage, and you should see a press release go out shortly about it. And then our last partnership, last but not least, I would say, I put this at the end because it's currently wrapping up. It's the Niagara Adapts partnership. This is one of our only kind of shorter 2-year partnership agreements, and it was specifically linked to funding that these municipalities had received to create climate change adaptation plans. So this partnership is led by Dr. Jessica Blythe, It's between our center and 7 municipalities in Niagara, and so they're listed out here. And it really was designed to build innovative climate solutions right here in Niagara. So at the end of the day, what that means is these 7 municipalities have worked through a series of workshops with us and actually created climate change adaptation plans for each of their city or municipality, which they can then begin to implement. So there's tons of information on our Niagara Adapts partnership website, which we linked here. There's climate change assessments, videos, you name it, we've hopefully done it. But Niagara Adapts, it's all there. I hope I didn't rush through that too much. Well, if you have any questions about any of the partnerships, we'd be more than happy to answer them at the end. And for now, I will turn it over to Ryan again.
Thanks so much, Amanda. And no, I don't think you rushed at all. I mean, I'm exhausted just from kind of seeing them all in one place, even though I've lived a lot of this. And so, as I said at the outset, one of our goals was to share a little bit at a very high level about our innovative partnerships, and I hope that everyone has a flavor about those. When we started to sign all of these partnerships, though, and when we started to undertake these partnerships in the spirit of sustainability science, one of the things that really came to the forefront for us was, are we actually making a difference? And that might sound like kind of a Captain Obvious question, but oftentimes what we find is we don't actually take stock. We don't actually measure oftentimes if we're actually having an impact. Are we actually making the changes that we set out to make? And ironically, the more that we got into this area from a literature perspective, from an academic perspective, we found that there hasn't been a lot of work done in this actual area. So ironically, like so many other things that become fashionable or sexy for a period of time, a lot of individuals, institutions are running around. Yes, partnerships are fantastic. Yes, we want to sign an MOU. As you saw in those photographs, senior administrators show up, photo ops, pictures, Brock News stories. Oh, this is fantastic. Well, for those of us that live and breathe sustainability, we want to know at the end of the day that we're actually making the world a little bit better. Are we having that impact on society? Are we having that impact on environment in a positive way? And so, ironically, if we can go to the next slide, Aaron, this very simple question, and I have to want to say thank you to Gervin, because he really was one that kind of sparked a lot of this. And part of that conversation I had with him was, well, if we're going to go down this road and do these things, how are we going to actually know that we are making a difference? Because, of course, as an institution, we need to report on that. And as a center and as a director of a center, I need to tell you, the audience, students, faculty, we're putting all this time and energy into these things. Why? And so you'll probably notice in your own research program, as you start asking one question, it just spawns more and more questions. And so we had this hilarious series of meetings as a team, and we started kind of going through, like, what do we actually know about this? Why are these partnerships being prioritized? And that led us to, well, we should always start with a literature search and, what's kind of the state of the science and practice in terms of higher education institutions and these partnerships. What's been done? And then that led us down like this rabbit hole. And my colleague Darby McGrath uses the term brainworms, and we tease each other about it because it gets stuck in your head and it just won't go away. And so then we started thinking, well, is it actually conceptually possible to measure this stuff? And then that gave us more questions about, okay, we've got all these partnerships, but is it actually possible then to empirically measure this in the context of sustainability science? And if it is, what would we actually then tell sustainability scientists that are doing this? And then most broadly, if we were able to do all this, could we actually generalize beyond sustainability science to other fields, like Jessica mentioned at the outset, health science, and other avenues that are having these partnerships? And so all of these questions sparked an entire new line of inquiry for myself and my colleagues that we had no background in, but we kind of just dove in with both feet. And so I'm going to turn it over to Samantha to kind of give you a snapshot of that journey and some of the exciting research that's come out of it.
Thanks, Ryan. So I'm going to talk through a couple of papers that have come out of exploring the questions that Ryan summarized on the last slide. And we're starting with the issue of performance in higher education institutions, which I will call HEI from now on, community partnerships, a Canadian perspective. So this was published in the Journal of Higher Education Policy and Management earlier this year. And if we could go to the next slide. The study aimed to develop a better understanding of the state of HEI community partnerships in Canada specifically, because this was an obvious knowledge void in the literature when we first started looking into this topic. And so we wanted to know what indicators and specific measures are considered important to accurately assess the performance of these types of partnerships. So we undertook a search of Canadian HEIs with an explicit mandate relating to community relationships. And from there, we distributed an initial questionnaire to their offices. And this kind of helped us answer big picture questions like what's the state of partnerships, how important they are, how are they formalized, incentivized, tracked, all those types of questions. And then from that, we also had a second questionnaire that the office could distribute to both individuals in the HEI as well as community partnerships that are involved in these types of relationships. And so the purpose of that questionnaire was to narrow it down and actually look at, with the people who are involved in these types of processes, what are the best indicators to assess the performance of HEI community partnerships. And we wanted to get the perspective of both the HEI and the community partners because involving everyone in assessment and evaluation provides a more complete picture of how the partnership is operating. And so we asked about the importance and appropriateness of indicators and measures for three important aspects of partnerships. And that included inputs, processes, and outcomes. I won't get into that now, but if there are questions, specific questions about that, we could talk about it. And so from our analysis, we were able to glean a couple novel insights. So from the institutional level questionnaire, we found that HEI community partnerships were considered important by the institutions for both traditional academic research purposes, but also reflecting that emerging third mission statements that emphasize community connection. But there were limitations for assessing partnerships, including varying degrees and processes for formalization, lack of ongoing monitoring, and limited incentives to actually engage in these types of partnerships. And then in terms of the 47 indicators we proposed, they were actually all perceived as important and accurate measures for measuring partnership performance in this context. And again, we can kind of get into specifics if there are any questions about that. But since we were able to validate these measures, we then developed the HEI Community Partnership Performance Index, or the HCPPI, which is a tool that sets out these 47 indicators for measuring and tracking inputs, processes, and outcomes for successful partnerships. And this is meant to be an accessible tool that can be used by both HEI and community partners to understand the performance of their partnership over time. And we can go to the next slide. Another paper that came out of this work is titled Higher Education Institution Community Partnerships, Measuring the Performance of Sustainability Science Initiatives. And this was published in Innovative Higher Education. And if we can go to the next slide. So essentially, we did the previous study and then as a next step, we wanted to test the validity of the HCPPI tool. And we did that by examining the performance of 3 sustainability science initiatives. And the context here is important because we wanted to, again, as Ryan mentioned, demonstrate that this could be used in different fields, including first testing it out in sustainability science. So we examined the performance of Niagara Adapts, the Brock Lincoln Living Lab, and the Excellence in Environmental Stewardship Initiative Partnership using the HCPPI. And so we administered the tool to both those involved from the HEE side as well as the community partner side. And in terms of overall performance of the sustainability science initiatives, the respondents provided positive ratings across all 3 dimensions of the HCPPI, and each partnership was rated positively in each dimension across all partnerships. Our results also found that the HCPPI and its subscales are highly reliable. So they showed inter-rater reliability both across and within organizations involved in these initiatives. And we were also able to capture the perspectives of multiple different people, thereby accounting for their unique perspective that makes up the partnership and providing, again, a more comprehensive picture of partnership performance. And we can go to the next slide. And so lastly, we have a paper right now that's in review in sustainability science called Transdisciplinary Partnerships for Sustainability, an Evaluation Guide. And so where other papers so far have focused on performance assessment, this paper takes it one step further to discuss how we can assess the performance and impacts of transdisciplinary partnerships for sustainability. And so this was more of a perspective paper. We didn't carry out empirical work here, but we did use literature and the collective experiences of all of the authors to create an evaluation guide that consists of 10 key steps to navigate and examine the partnership process for continuous improvement, and then also how to understand how these partnerships are contributing to sustainable futures. So in the paper, we discuss first multiple challenges that are associated with evaluation, including understanding what should be evaluated, who should be involved, and how it actually occurs. And then we also touch on challenges that are specific to transdisciplinary partnerships. So like integrating multiple knowledges is one that comes up often. And it makes it difficult to come up with an exact recipe on how to evaluate these partnerships because they are very context specific and problem oriented as well. So again, in this paper, we outlined 5 steps that should be undertaken for assessing partnership performance for sustainability. And these steps are based off of our other work in the papers we just went over. And I think that there's going to be later on a slide that shows kind of a overview figure of all of these steps. So we can get into that more then. But we also discussed the 5 steps for evaluating the impacts of these partnerships too. So impacts are more about the causal effects of the partnership, and this kind of usually occurs closer to the end or at the end of a partnership. And so again, we have 5 steps there that we can go over in a little bit. But what this guide really demonstrates is how performance assessment can be systematically incorporated into these partnerships, and for understanding the ways in which to capture the impacts of them on the people and the planet. And this is a complementary feedback sort of process, which allows us to reflect and then alter the course of our partnerships in order to be more effective. So you get a more complete and comprehensive evaluation of transdisciplinary partnerships over time, which will also ultimately enhance sustainability science initiatives themselves, but then also hopefully produce the solutions that we want and need as well. And we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Erin. And so through all of these research studies and papers that we've now gone through, we're finally getting some answers for sustainability. We're making progress in navigating these complex evaluation questions surrounding this context. And we now know that the HCPPI is a reliable tool to measure partnerships from disciplines like sustainability. We are recognizing the importance of capturing both the HEI and the community perspective. And we have a tool that affords insight into what is working for us, as well as what needs to be changed for better results. And so we know that the process, however messy and difficult to navigate, it is really important for improving partnership initiatives over time, and also for generating those impactful solutions to our greatest challenges. And I believe I can hand it back to Ryan from here.
Thank you so much, Samantha. So I'm going to just tie this all together as we wrap up our presentation. And I promised at the outset that I would bring this back at the end, or near the conclusion at least, to sustainability science and make those connections to that kind of iconic Lang diagram. And I also want to acknowledge Jessica's role in all of this. And she's been inspirational in this iconic figure and is a co-author on this paper, which we're eagerly waiting to hear back from the editors of Sustainability Sciences in its second round of reviews. So if we go back for a second to that initial Lang diagram that I walked through, you'll notice that in the center here, we have reflected each of those kind of phases that Lang put forward that we go through in a sustainability science research process. And so those are common to everything we do as sustainability scientists. We start by working with others inside and outside the academy in a transdisciplinary way to frame and understand that problem and get the team together that we need to answer those questions or to navigate that space. We then try to co-create and take a applied or a solution orientation to co-create what that actual knowledge is. And then somehow we want to actually apply it, so we're making a real world difference. So that's where this kind of penchant or all these questions for performance as well as impact. And I think Samantha gave a wonderfully accessible definition to what those each are and how they're different. And again, this isn't something that's been delved into in the sustainability science space, nor the HEI educational literature. And so what we then see in this diagram, where we've tried to synthesize all of this knowledge from this kind of trajectory research, is to say for sustainability scientists, these things, performance assessment and impact evaluation, are going to happen throughout this transdisciplinary research process. They're intertwined or integrated. They're going to involve both academic and non-academic partners. And then, as Samantha so nicely articulated, we've set out 5 guides for how people can start thinking about consciously incorporating both performance assessment as well as impact evaluation at the outset of their sustainability science research. And I want to emphasize that it's so critically important to do that because, again, from a policy perspective, we need metrics, we need to report on, are we making a difference? But critical from a resilience perspective is we need to use this information so we can make changes, so we can improve, so we can make sure that the partnership is fulfilling the needs of both the community or non-academics and the academics. And so if we don't do this, we don't assess our performance continually, if we don't look and are we having and making an impact, there's no way that we can learn, there's no way that we can adapt, and ultimately there's no way that we can transform both society and the environment. And so for us, this kind of culminating heuristic or graphic really pulls together it's kind of the culmination of our whole program of research in this area. And I think it's what we strive to do at the ESRC across both our education, our research, and our community service. So if I can go to the final slide, Aaron. I want to just end with a couple concluding thoughts. First of all, I really hope that our presentation today has helped understand 3 things. And first of all, a little bit at least about what the ESRC is, and a whole lot about our innovative partnership branch. But ultimately, how does that manifest itself in how we actually do sustainability science? I think the second thing I want to leave you with is that you now have a high-level overview of our innovative partnerships. I would, encourage each of you to get involved. I know the faculty have gotten involved, and every student that has been able to get involved in those various partnerships, I think it's been a very enriching experience in terms of building your CV, in terms of gaining experience that now a lot of employers are also looking for. And so there's multiple avenues that are really important about getting involved in those innovative partnerships. And last but not least, I hope our presentation illustrates how sometimes those line of questioning that we have can then become a whole new area of research that's put into practice. And as transdisciplinary scholars, sometimes that doesn't necessarily align with your training. So for example, for myself, I have no education degrees and no background in education at all. But in this journey with my colleagues, and I'm smiling because I think Amanda from our entire team is the only one that actually has an education degree. We actually managed to pursue this research from a transdisciplinary perspective. And I'm very proud that we've been able to publish it in some of the very high level leading, education, higher education policy journals. So that's a real achievement. And I think it's something that I want to just flag for all of you, that it's sometimes rewarding to go in a totally different direction and try something new. To conclude, I want to thank our colleagues in the ESRC who've embraced our innovative partnerships and have done so much wonderful work towards them, as well as our staff at the ESRC who make all this possible. I want to also thank our partners, and without their engagement and meeting us halfway, none of this would be possible. And of course, we've had both professionally and personally some wonderful moments when we meet in the middle, so to speak, with sustainability science. And last but not least, I want to thank all the students that have been part of these partnerships over the years, and it's provided a rich point of intersection for all of us. So I'll leave it there with those acknowledgements and turn it back over to you, Jessica, for any questions.
Thank you so much, Ryan and Amanda and Samantha, for a really wonderful presentation and such a comprehensive picture of this very unwieldy and innovative and exciting work that we are engaged in. So thank you so much. We have tons of questions coming in, and I will just start handing them over to you. Everyone is issuing their thanks. Faculty and students are all saying thank you so much for the really great presentation. So I'm going to skip all those, that's a given, and just go straight to the questions. So first question comes from Lauren, and she's asked, how does the operation of a long distance partnership, for example, the Government of the Northwest Territories, differentiate from the more local ones that you're involved in?
Ryan, I could take that on if that works. Okay, so I would say pre-COVID, we had visions of travel being involved with GNWT, with our partnership there. And I think that will still happen, but the reality is we've actually come to be very comfortable in the virtual space. And so I think some of our partners maybe weren't as comfortable at the beginning of COVID, but all of our partnerships basically over the last, is it 18 months now? I'm not sure. 18 months have been long distance, if you want to frame it that way. I think we've seen one partner in person during this time. And so, yeah, we've just navigated it like everyone else. And I don't see GNWT as being any different anymore. I think originally we thought, oh, this is going to be really different. They're so far away. We had kind of done some of this far away work with our WWF Canada partners out in New Brunswick. There had been some travel involved, but I think what COVID has shown all of us is anything is possible from a distance, and really those distances have been closed with these virtual platforms that we've been able to engage on, and we've been able to engage so many more partners. I'm thinking they're senior managers and things, because we can bring them all on to these virtual platforms. We realized quickly at the start of COVID how much work Brock had done pre-COVID to actually move people online. We had access to a lot of resources like MS Teams and Life Size that we're streaming on today that our partners just didn't have at the time. And so we actually came out looking as though we were very prepared for this. And honestly, yeah, the distance, I think we've realized, doesn't matter as much. I don't know, Ryan, if you want to add anything to that.
Well, the one thing I would add, and I guess I would just one nuance to your messaging. You indicated that we transitioned like everyone else, and I'm not sure that everyone did make that transition so smoothly. And Amanda, I just want to really give a shout out to you and Aaron, because I think the only reason we were able to do that is both you and Aaron and your hard work. I do also want to say just how challenging it could be and how daunting it was for some of our partners who are less comfortable in this space. And so I guess the thing I would add is don't be afraid to fail. And you know it's going to happen. It's like technology, right? We've done literally, I've lost track of how many things we've done. And yet today, it was like quadruple fail on technology. So the point is, try it. It's okay to fail, and everybody in the partnership has to be comfortable with the potential for failure. But you know what? If it works, you can make it work anywhere, and it's amazing how that distance shrinks now, and people become comfortable with it.
Thank you so much. And that's actually an excellent segue into our next question. So Alexandra is wondering, how important is it that both parties have the same end goals before you begin the partnership? Or can this be achieved along the way, or is it essential that it happens at the very beginning?
I'm smiling because I don't know if I should take this or if Ryan wants to. I'll start again if that's okay, Ryan. I would say, okay, so it is important. And I wouldn't say so much as end goals, but we have overarching goals, like I talked about, that are in every one of the MOUs that we sign. That being said, I would say like an example end goal would be a full action plan to lead the partnership. So really those first few years are actually about developing that action plan. And that's when you're working together to actually figure out, what do we want to accomplish through this partnership? And we're going to create this plan to do so. I think a big part of my role, and something that we should definitely kind of flag for all of you, is the scoping piece. So these things can quickly spiral. We all have brain worms, like Ryan said, both us and our partners. And so a large part of my role is kind of the scoping piece and making sure that we keep things in check, because it's in all of us to want to do everything and go kind of above and beyond with every single thing we do. And that's wonderful. And I think that's a great attitude to have in life, but they can quickly become overwhelming and far bigger than what resources allow for. And so, yeah, a big part of what you have to keep in mind always when you're working with partners or on a specific project is that scoping piece. You want to make sure that you keep revisiting those goals that you set or your action plan, and that you're sticking to that, because if things do get out of control, things can start falling off the radar and going south quickly too, and you don't want that to happen. I don't know if you want to add to that, Ryan.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple
things. Can I jump in? There's another question which was specifically for you and kind of builds on this. So let me add it, and then maybe you can respond to both. I know that's challenging, so let me challenge you. Lindsay was asking, and it builds off Amanda's response here, but is also related. When you mentioned this notion of brain worms, and I think this is like the time in the semester where many of us are feeling like this, and for people who are getting bogged down by questions that you don't necessarily have answers to, how do you suggest getting out of that brain worm space, or sometimes we call it squirreling?
Love it, and I love the fact, Jess, that you're challenging me. It kind of reminds me of the time when you stole a dessert at a Brock Lincoln Living Lab event, as I recall, and then we're challenging me again, like, where did your dessert go, Ryan? I didn't see it. Anyways, so let me tackle the first one, and then I'll get to Lindsay's question also. So in terms of the first question, Amanda, I think, had an excellent answer. I just add a couple of things. If you go back to that sustainability science imperative, we are about co-creating knowledge, and that process where we have the team together to come to a common understanding of what the challenge is, and then we co-create both the scientific and the applied implementation of that knowledge. And so, as Amanda said, in our MOUs, we kind of have very broad framing, but then we put in measures there so that, for example, we have a steering committee that meets every year. We then go through a planning process, usually where we identify actions, make those shared decisions. So that's not just one side, it's both sides of the partnership. And then, that also hinges on this adaptive process where we take stock and we use the feedbacks. And that's really, as Samantha articulated, what our line of research was about. So ultimately we can improve that partnership process. And I mean, the best example I can give you of that is Marilyn's lead on the Brock Lincoln Living Lab, because I mean, I don't know of any of our partnerships, one that there's been so many changes and pivoting and adjustment over the course of its lifespan, and she's just done a wonderful job of navigating that. So it's a yearly thing, and it changes, and that's a good thing. The brainworm, I have a very clear answer for that, and I want to first say everybody's just different. So number one, you got to find what works for you. But in my experience and experience with these partnerships, it's getting together and talking it out and coming to a shared understanding with your colleagues. And so, and I give the same advice to students, and Jess used the term squirreling, right? And that's after our student Ange, who's now working on her PhD, because she'd be like, oh, I went down the rabbit hole, I was squirreling, and I've just been reading it, like, come in. And if you had a chance to meet Angela, she talks a million miles a minute. She gets so enthusiastic. And then she's like got papers and papers all over the place, and she just fires off all these ideas. And usually within 20 minutes, we can come up with a solution. And we only do that by talking it out as colleagues and through discourse. And so Samantha, I think, is another great example of someone that, that's a process that we've worked together through for a number of years. And I think we've always been able to come to better solutions together. So if I, for example, get stuck on a brainworm, I'll actually reach out to a colleague, Amanda, Jessica, Samantha, and I say, hey, listen, I'm stuck on this. I need to talk it out with somebody. And sometimes you don't even need to really know that much about what the context is. It's just helping to talk it out with somebody. So that's how both in our partnerships, I find, a way to get out of brainworms.
Thank you very much. That's really good advice. That's one thing I miss about being in Tealhouse together, is sorting ourselves out when we get too far down one particular rabbit hole. All right, our next question is coming in from Tasha, and she is wondering about the role of impact evaluation and its sort of intersection with community engagement and sort of stakeholder engagement. So does that process allow institutions to be more transparent with communities, and can you speak to that intersection?
I'd be happy to, but maybe Samantha, did you want to weigh in on that first, kind of based on some of our work, and then I can follow up, or would you prefer I take it?
I can start you off, I guess, just with my initial thoughts. I know that impact evaluation is kind of what you focused on in a lot of these papers, but in terms of like that transparency, I think that these types of partnerships really help build in that transparency, because you're needing to share your results and you're tracking these things in order to, I guess, almost like prove that what you're doing is making a difference, and exactly how it's making a difference as well. You're not kind of just saying, oh, this is working because I think it is. You actually have real results through your impact evaluation, which is done in an effective manner, in a transparent manner, because you're getting both of those perspectives as well, the HEI perspective as well as the community partner perspective. So I do think that it does help with transparency. Ryan, I'm not sure if you have anything to add to that.
I guess just a couple thoughts. I mean, the impact evaluation is critical, and yet it is very rarely done. And that's not just in sustainability science, that's writ large. I mean, typically, right, we get grants, we do projects, and then it's like, oh, project's done, money's done, we didn't build an evaluation, whoops. Impact evaluation in social ecological systems or sustainability writ large is really, really tough, because think about with impact evaluation, we're trying to measure the change in something in a social ecological system, and measuring those change is really difficult, because we're trying to capture something that doesn't have a baseline necessarily, so we didn't measure it before. B, we're trying to make sense of complex systems which have emergent properties, which is really incredibly difficult. And then, we've got the messiness of doing this kind of from an empirical standpoint. So questions like, what is it that we want to have an impact on? And that impact, you know, to try to get that causal relationship is so difficult, especially when systems change. So if we think of like an ecological variable that we're trying to say, did this partnership enhance, you know, for example, the trails asset tourism, did it enhance trails? Well, we could think of an ecological perspective like trail compaction, or you could think of a social question about trail users. And in impact evaluation, we actually go out and we ask those people outside the partnership. So even if, for example, we're in a partnership, oh, great partnership, we're doing awesome. Well, if we're not actually having an impact on people outside the partnership, on the ecosystem, are we actually having that impact or not? You know, we don't have any empirical evidence of it. I mean, are we actually making a difference? So ironically, I would argue we need both performance and impact evaluation, because performance tells us, are we doing the right things? Are we performing effectively and efficiently? And impact evaluation says, are we actually having the end effect that we're desiring?
Can I add just really quickly to that too, Jess? I would say we realized quickly, and Sam briefly mentioned this, but the idea that our partners and ourselves are going to want to see different impacts, and just, you know, noting how important it is to have both perspectives on what those impacts are that you're measuring, right? So I just didn't want that to get lost. It's really important, and we noticed as soon as we started going through the literature that oftentimes the community partner is left out of impact and performance evaluation, to be honest. And so we took it, you know, as something we really wanted to highlight, that both sides had to be seen in the tools that we were creating.
Thank you all for those responses. We've got so many questions coming in here. It's awesome. We may not have a chance to get to all of them, so I'm thinking, keeping my eye on the time, maybe we'll take 2 more. The next one's coming from Tyler. Tyler's question relates to the Trail and Asset and Tourism Initiative. He's wondering, how closely did this innovative partnership work with the Bruce Trail Conservancy? And if you did having such a prominent nature conservatory, conservancy located in Niagara boost the efficiency or the, you know, the partnership?
Can I speak to this one, Ryan? Is that okay? So Tyler, so this partnership was signed, like I said, in March 2020. We did a major pivot with COVID, and it's something kind of Ryan briefly mentioned in one of his previous answers, but this idea that partnerships have to pivot or are asked to pivot at certain points became very apparent during COVID. And so this was one of those ones that did that. So we are starting to work with the Bruce Trail Conservancy, but just so Niagara Parks, we've just kind of finalized our action plan for the partnership, I want to say in the last like 2 months. And so the idea of how their trails actually connect to the broader trail network in Niagara is a focus, but that work is just starting. So great point. I would say, like, if you checked the year in review next year, you would see some of those connections start to develop, but that's definitely on their radar.
Thank you very much. And that's exciting. And it's, yeah, these things move quickly and they're dynamic, and it's so exciting to hear how they unfold. Yeah, and there's a lot to be learned from what's ongoing. I said 2, I'm going to make room for 3. So the final 2 questions, one is probably for you, Amanda, and then the final one I'll pitch at Ryan. So Shannon is wondering if you could provide some examples of events on campus that happen in partnership with the WWF Living Planet leaders to achieve volunteer hours.
Yeah, I totally can. Okay, so last year, everything was virtual due to COVID. So we held a few events where people could get involved and learn more about the certificate. The 2 major pieces we did was virtual cleanups. The first was interesting. I think it was a harder sell. The second, we had, I want to say 20 or 30 students actually go out and do cleanups in their local communities. And we had international students take part. It was awesome. And so they collected volunteer hours that way. There is opportunities if students want to take the lead on events to actually get leadership hours. So we're open, if you have any great ideas and you want to get involved, that's awesome. We are actually hoping to host some smaller in-person cleanups this year, as COVID restrictions kind of have loosened a bit. So that is on the docket for this year. Hopefully that's helpful.
Awesome. Those are great examples. And thanks for that question, Shannon, because that's probably of interest to many of us. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to make this the last question. Thank you all for the questions you submitted. And hopefully we have opportunities to continue these conversations and maybe back in person when we start in January. So thank you so much. But the final question I'm going to pitch to the panel is from Kristen. So Kristen is asking about the fact that we are involved in 8 partnerships, and specifically wondering about how does the ESRC balance all the partnerships, to ensure this attention required is going to each partner, and how do you balance it all?
I think Amanda should
Ryan,
take
yes,
it.
I'm pitching that at you, Ryan, the master of balance.
Oh, perfect. Yes, thanks. I was gonna try to flick it to Amanda because yeah, I was curious to what. Oh, Amanda, why don't you start? I'm curious to what you're gonna say.
I don't know if any of us have a good sense of balance in our lives, but I would say it comes back to kind of scoping, and I a lot of times am that person that's not the negative person, just the one trying to keep us kind of all in check and our ideas in check, and bringing us back to, okay, what do we have capacity for, and looking at those resources. So I flagged how important resources were at the beginning of the presentation, and I'll just flag again how important they are here. So with several partnerships, a lot of our audience today is probably Master of Sustainability students who are tuning in. Many of you have research assistantships tied to the partnerships, and so you help enable a lot of the work that goes on in them. And honestly, it's pivotal to do what we do. We need those research assistantship positions. The idea that each partnership is led by a faculty or staff lead is really important to note. So for example, Jessica led Niagara Adapts. She didn't lead all 8. And so it's really, that's a crucial piece, is that we really try to have kind of one person involved. There's many of us who work across the partnerships, and so I would be one of those people, but that's not the case for every single faculty lead. And then also keeping in mind that when one kind of is wrapping up, so Niagara Adapts is wrapping up right now, and we're just bringing the Government of the Northwest Territories on. So always trying to, we basically said we're at capacity right now, but resources, keeping everything in check in terms of project management, and then using those resources effectively to hire staff like Samantha to help us move these forward, I think are the 3 main things I have. I don't know if Ryan has anything to add to that.
Yeah, I'll add a couple. Thanks, Amanda. So for myself, I mean, number one is to take an integrated approach. And I hope, at least in our presentation, we were able to illustrate how these partnerships cut across everything we do. So, there's oftentimes a research element that's associated with it. There's an educative component to it, and there's also, a service component. And so with our PhD program, for example, coming on, and Amanda spoke to the involvement of many of our master's students, but with our PhD, it's actually, again, integrated into these partnerships because in sustainability science is what we do. So that helps a lot in terms of how we handle it. The second thing I would say is you need to have and build capacity. And so, for example, when Gervin encouraged us and supported us, I mean, through various mechanisms, we were able to create that capacity that wasn't possible before. So part of my job, additional work, was to actually catalyze these on behalf of the university. That process has now ended. But what you see came out of a lot of that. And second of all, for the faculty, again, in working with Gervin, we were able to have a mechanism which is called a release time stipend. So instead of a faculty teaching a course, they were able to take that allotment of time and put it towards leading one of these partnerships. And to me, that was essential, because without that, there's just no possible way to do it in any semblance of balance. I'm not attesting that we have balance, but I think it's mission impossible to actually do it without having that space and time for dedicated faculty. And then the last thing I would just add, and this is actually probably the single most important thing, it's having amazing people, and that's the only way to make this work. And again, I'm not suggesting that we have it all figured out and are balanced in any way, but it's passionate, brilliant people that all are excited about this and put their shoulder into it and work together as a team that make it possible. And I'm extremely grateful for that. And those same people, as a center, we get together and we essentially have a good talk about, where are we at with capacity? How are we all doing with balance? COVID's been an incredibly challenging time. And are we as a center in a position where we can and want to take on this, and whatever the partnership is? And so, for example, right now we are launching a PhD program. We have a review of our Master Sustainability program, an external review. And so, again, right now, the answer would be no, we're at max. But it's something that we, again, check in on as a team regularly, because it's dynamic and it changes. So sorry for the long-winded answer, but integration, capacity, and absolutely amazing people.
Thank you all so much. So I think, keeping my eye on the time, I'm going to wrap it up there. I would like to extend a huge thank you to our presenters today for sharing some of the work that is going on to really advance sustainability science through these partnerships. And it feels genuinely like a privilege to hear you speak about these partnerships and to be engaged in them. And it really feels like enacting sustainability science the way that the theory calls for us to be doing it. So thank you for sharing your insights. Thank you to the audience for being here with us. A gentle reminder to those formally enrolled in 5P04 to make sure you do your entry on key insights for your learning journal about this week's seminar. And a final note that our last seminar for 2021 is coming up in 2 weeks. It will be 3-minute thesis, which is always so much fun, and you learn so much. So please join us 2 weeks from today on the 22nd of November for our master's students presenting their thesis via the 3MT format. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful Monday.